I don't need money, mister. I just want a hug, like you'd give your daughter. Those words, spoken by a 6-year-old girl with wide, hopeful eyes, stopped Ethan, a wealthy loner, in his tracks at a bustling Central Park festival. Her simple plea sparked a journey that unraveled his guarded heart. What makes a child ask for a hug from a stranger? And how could one moment change 3 lives forever? This is a story of healing, connection, and the love that blooms in unexpected places. If it touches you, hit that subscribe button and share where you're listening from. Day or night, city or countryside. Stay with us to discover how a single hug rewrites a man's future. Will it rewrite yours too? The city pulsed around Ethan Caldwell, a rhythm of ambition and urgency that never paused. At 38, he had carved his name into Manhattan's skyline, a real estate magnate whose deals shaped the city's edges. His penthouse, perched high above the Hudson, gleamed with polished glass and cold chrome, a testament to his success. Yet as he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the glittering sprawl below felt distant, like a painting he could admire but never touch. Success had built him a fortress, but it was one of solitude. Each achievement a brick in the walls that kept the world at bay. Ethan's life was measured in contracts signed, properties acquired, and numbers climbing in his bank account. His tailored charcoal suit, crisp even at the end of a grueling day, was armor against the chaos of human connection. He moved through boardrooms with precision, his voice steady, his handshake firm, but his eyes, hazel, sharp, guarded, revealed nothing. To the world he was untouchable, a man who needed nothing beyond what he could buy. But beneath the surface a quiet ache lingered, one he buried under late nights and early mornings. That ache had roots in a childhood spent in a modest Long Island suburb, in a house too big for two. His mother, Ellen, had been a soft-spoken woman, her hands calloused from waitressing, her smile weary but warm. Ethan's father, a fleeting figure, had vanished when Ethan was 6, leaving behind only monthly bank transfers and a void no money could fill. Those checks arrived like clockwork, but never with a note, never with a call, never with the weight of arms around a boy who waited at the school gates, eyes scanning for a car that never came. Ethan learned early that money was reliable, but people were not. He built his life on that truth, or so he thought. Tonight, though, the city's pulse felt too loud, too insistent. A marathon of meetings had left him drained. Another high-rise deal closed, another million secured, another hollow victory. He loosened his tie, the silk slipping through his fingers like water, and made a rare decision. No emails, no calls, no plans. He'd walk, lose himself in the city he'd helped shape. Central Park was alive with its Summer Street Festival, a chaos of color and sound that promised something softer than the sterile hum of his office. The park buzzed with life under strings of golden lights. Food trucks lined the paths, their smoky scents of grilled burgers and caramelized onions mingling with the sweetness of cotton candy. Children darted through the crowd, their laughter sharp and fleeting, while musicians strummed guitars on makeshift stages. Ethan moved through it all, an outsider in his own city, his polished shoes out of place on the gravel paths. He didn't belong here, not really, but the noise was a welcome distraction from the silence waiting back at his penthouse. He stopped at a small ice cream stand, its faded red awning swaying in the warm breeze. The vendor, a gray-haired man with a quick smile, handed him a vanilla cone without a word, as if sensing Ethan's need for simplicity. Ethan paid, the cold sweetness grounding him for a moment. He turned, cone in hand, and that's when he saw her, a small figure standing just to his right, barely reaching his waist. A girl no more than 6, with wild chestnut curls spilling over her shoulders, her dress slightly frayed at the hem, her sneakers scuffed but tied with care. Her eyes caught him first, wide and unblinking, the color of warm amber under the festival lights. They held no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet intensity that made Ethan pause. She stood close, closer than most would dare, her small hands clasped in front of her. He crouched slightly, instinctively softening his voice. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, his tone one he rarely used, gentle but unsure. "Are you okay? Do you need something? You need..." He reached for his wallet, a reflex born from years of solving problems with cash. A few bills, he thought, would be enough. Maybe she was hungry, maybe lost. But the girl shook her head, curls bouncing, and her voice came clear and steady, cutting through the festival's hum. "I don't need money," she said, her words small but heavy. "I just want a hug, like the one you give your daughter." Ethan froze, the ice cream dripping onto his hand, cold against his skin. I, I don't have a daughter," he managed, his voice quieter than he meant. The girl tilted her head, undeterred, her eyes searching his. "I don't have a dad," she said, softer now, almost a whisper. "I've never been hugged by one. I see kids at school and they get hugs when they're picked up. I just want to know what that feels like." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Ethan's chest. He saw himself at her age, standing alone in a front yard, waiting for a father who never showed. The festival faded. The music, the laughter, the clink of coins at nearby stalls. All that remained was this girl, her small frame, and her impossible request. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew the ache in her voice. It was his own, buried deep, untouched for decades. He set the ice cream down on the stand's counter, his hands trembling slightly. "Okay," he said, the word barely audible. He knelt, the gravel biting into his knee through his suit, and opened his arms. She stepped forward without hesitation, her small body warm against his chest, her arms wrapping around his neck. She was light, fragile, but the weight of her trust pressed heavy against him. For a moment he closed his eyes, breathing in the faint scent of lavender in her hair, and tried to hold back the tide rising in his throat. The world came back slowly. Footsteps, voices, the hum of the crowd. Ethan opened his eyes, still holding her, and saw a woman approaching, her steps quick but controlled, her face a mix of alarm and resolve. She carried a paper bag of festival food, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose braid. "Sophie," she called, her voice sharp but steady, a mother's instinct cutting through the noise. The festival's golden light swayed above, casting a warm glow over the gravel path where Ethan knelt, Sophie still nestled in his arms. Her small frame felt like a tether to something he'd long forgotten, her warmth seeping through the crisp fabric of his suit. The weight of her words, "I just want a hug like the one you give your daughter," lingered, stirring memories he'd buried under years of calculated deals and solitary nights. The crowd's hum, the sizzle of food stalls, the distant strum of a guitar, they all blurred, leaving only the quiet rhythm of her breathing against his chest. The woman's voice, sharp, protective, cut through the haze. "Sophie?" Ethan looked up, his arms loosening as Sophie turned her head, her curls brushing his chin. The woman stood a few steps away, her blonde braids slightly frayed, her hands gripping a paper bag so tightly the edges crinkled. Her eyes, a fierce gray, locked onto Ethan's, scanning him with a mother's instinct, weighing his intent. She was striking in her simplicity. Jeans, a faded blue shirt, no makeup, but her presence carried a quiet strength, like steel wrapped in soft cloth. Ethan gently eased Sophie back, her sneakers crunching on the gravel as she stepped away, her face bright with a smile. "Mommy, this is the warm hug man," she said, her voice clear and proud, as if she'd named a hero. The woman's gaze softened slightly, but her posture remained guarded, one hand reaching for Sophie's. "Who are you?" she asked Ethan, her tone steady, no trace of panic, only a demand for truth. He stood, brushing gravel from his knee, and met her eyes. "Ethan Caldwell," he said, his voice low, careful not to startle. "I was just passing through." She asked for a hug. "I didn't mean to overstep." He gestured vaguely toward the ice cream stand, where his abandoned cone was melting into a puddle. Sophie tugged her mother's hand, undeterred. "He hugged me like the dads at school, Mommy. It was nice." The woman's expression wavered, a flicker of something, relief perhaps, or curiosity, crossing her face. She knelt to Sophie's level, her hand brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice softer now, meant only for Sophie. The girl nodded vigorously, her smile unwavering. "He's nice. He didn't give me money, just a hug." Ethan felt his chest tighten again, the simplicity of Sophie's words cutting deeper than any boardroom negotiation. He glanced at the woman who stood now, her eyes returning to his, still assessing but less sharp. "I'm Mia," she said, her voice measured, offering no last name. "Thank you for being kind. She doesn't usually talk to strangers." There was a pause heavy with unspoken questions, before she added, "We should get going." Ethan nodded, stepping back to give them space. But Sophie wasn't ready to leave. She pointed at the ice cream stand. "Can we get one, Mommy? Like his?" Mia hesitated, glancing at the bag in her hand, likely her budget for the night's dinner. Ethan saw the flicker of strain in her eyes, the kind that came from counting every dollar. Without thinking, he spoke. "It's on me," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Vanilla, right?" He looked at Sophie, who beamed and nodded. Mia's lips pressed into a thin line, her pride bristling. "We're fine," she said, but Sophie's hopeful eyes softened her resolve. "Okay," she relented, her voice quieter. "Just this once." Ethan handed the vendor a bill, and soon Sophie held a vanilla cone, her tongue darting out to catch the first drip. "Thank you, warm hug, man," she said, her giggle bright against the festival's hum. Mia watched her daughter, then glanced at Ethan, her expression unreadable, but no longer cold. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her tone a mix of gratitude and caution. Ethan shrugged, slipping his wallet back into his pocket. "It's just ice cream," he said, though he knew it wasn't. Not really. The moment felt heavier, like a thread had been tied between them. Fragile but there. As Mia and Sophie turned to leave, Sophie waved, her small hands sticky with ice cream. Ethan watched them blend into the crowd, the golden lights catching Mia's braid, Sophie's curls bouncing with each step. He stood there longer than he meant to, the festival's noise returning in a rush. Laughter, clinking glasses, a saxophone's mournful wail. His penthouse waited, silent and cold, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like the only place he belonged. Back in his apartment, Ethan shed his suit jacket, the fabric heavy with the day's weight. The city sparkled beyond his windows, indifferent to the shift inside him. He poured a glass of water, the clink of ice against glass echoing in the stillness. Sophie's voice replayed in his mind. "I don't have a dad," and with it, the image of his own childhood, waiting for a father who never came. He'd spent decades building a life where no one could leave him again, where money replaced trust, but that hug, brief and unasked for, had cracked something open. He sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the melting cone he'd left behind in his mind's eye. The ache wasn't new, but feeling it was. He thought of Mia, her guarded eyes, her quiet strength. She hadn't trusted him, not fully, but she hadn't pulled Sophie away either. That nod, that small gesture of acceptance, lingered like a question he couldn't answer. Ethan pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the calendar app. Meetings, site visits, deadlines filled the screen, a life meticulously planned. But tonight, something else took hold. He typed a single note, Central Park, Saturday, 3 p.m. He didn't know why, not exactly. Maybe it was Sophie's smile, or Mia's steady gaze, or the way that hug had felt like a memory he'd never lived. Whatever it was, it pulled him, a tide he didn't fight. The city hummed below, its lights flickering like stars too close to touch. Ethan set the phone down, the note saved, and let himself sit with the feeling, a longing he hadn't named in years. He didn't know what he'd find if he went back, but for once, he wanted to try. For once, he wanted to be more than the man who walked away. The city's lights blurred into a kaleidoscope as Ethan stared at the note on his phone. The words, Central Park, Saturday, 3 p.m., glowing softly in the dim penthouse. A week had slipped by since the festival, each day a blur of meetings and mergers. But Sophie's hug clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. He'd replayed the moment in quiet hours, the warmth of her small arms, the trust in her eyes, Mia's cautious nod. It was foolish, he told himself, to chase a fleeting encounter, but the pull was undeniable, a crack in his carefully constructed life. Saturday arrived with a crisp breeze, the sun filtering through Manhattan's towers as Ethan navigated the streets. He'd traded his suit for khakis and a simple button-down, an attempt to blend into the park's casual crowd, though his stride still carried the precision of a man used to boardrooms. Central Park thrummed with weekend energy, joggers weaving past picnickers, vendors hawking pretzels and balloons, the distant bark of dogs echoing off the trees. The festival had ended, but the paths buzzed with life, a reminder that the world moved on, even if Ethan's thoughts hadn't. He wandered aimlessly at first, his eyes scanning the crowds without expectation. The ice cream stand stood quiet now, its awning folded away, but the gravel path stirred memories. He paused near a cluster of benches where families gathered, their laughter a stark contrast to his solitude. And then he saw her, Sophie, perched on a picnic blanket spread under a sprawling oak, her curls tied back with a colorful ribbon, a sketch pad balanced on her knees. She was drawing furiously, her tongue poking out in concentration, oblivious to the world. Beside her, Mia knelt, organizing a small array of crayons and papers, her blonde braids swinging as she moved. She wore a light sundress today, practical but pretty, her face relaxed in the sunlight. This was no chance festival visit. It looked like a routine, a free art class for kids, judging by the half-dozen children scattered around, each with their own pad and colors. Mia glanced up, her gray eyes catching Ethan's, and for a moment, surprise flickered across her features before settling into recognition. "Ethan," she said, standing smoothly, brushing grass from her knees. Her voice held a note of curiosity, not alarm. Sophie looked up at the sound, her face lighting up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Warm hug, man," she exclaimed, dropping her crayon and scrambling to her feet. Before Ethan could respond, she barreled into him, her arms wrapping around his legs in a fierce embrace. He chuckled, the sound foreign to his own ears, and patted her back gently. "Hey, kiddo. Good to see you too." Mia watched, her arms crossed loosely, a small smile tugging at her lips. "This is a surprise," she said, her tone light but probing. "Didn't expect to run into you here." Ethan met her gaze, shrugging with feigned casualness. "I come to the park sometimes. Clears the head after a long week." It wasn't a lie, not entirely, but the truth hummed beneath. He'd come hoping, against reason, to find them. Sophie pulled back, grabbing his hand and tugging him toward the blanket. "Look what I'm drawing," she said, her excitement bubbling over. The sketch pad revealed a colorful mess of lines, a family of stick figures under a rainbow, one tall, one medium, one small. "That's me, Mommy, and a friend," she explained, her cheeks flushing slightly. Ethan knelt beside her, admiring the drawing with genuine interest. "It's great, Sophie. You've got real talent." Mia joined them, sitting cross-legged on the blanket. "She loves art," she said, her voice warm with pride. "I teach these little pop-up classes on weekends. Keeps her busy, and it's free for the neighborhood kids." Ethan nodded, glancing at the other children, their heads bent over their papers. "You're a teacher?" he asked, settling onto the edge of the blanket, feeling oddly at ease. "Freelance art instructor," Mia clarified, handing Sophie a fresh crayon. "I do workshops, school visits, whatever pays the bills. It's not glamorous, but it works for us." There was a resilience in her words, a quiet acceptance of life's edges. Ethan sensed the undercurrent, the single mom hustle, the careful budgeting that made festival treats a rarity. He thought of his own mother, juggling shifts to keep their home afloat, and felt a kinship he hadn't expected. As the class continued, Ethan stayed, drawn into the simple joy of it. Sophie handed him a crayon, insisting he draw with her. He sketched a clumsy tree, his lines hesitant, but her giggles made it worthwhile. Mia guided the kids with gentle encouragement, her hands deft as she demonstrated shading techniques. In the lulls, she and Ethan talked, surface things at first, the park's history, the changing seasons, but gradually it deepened. "You mentioned last time, Sophie doesn't have a dad," Ethan said softly, during a break when the kids were sharing their drawings. Mia's eyes flicked to Sophie, who was showing off her rainbow to a friend, then back to him. "He left when I was pregnant," she said, her voice even, without bitterness. "Said he wasn't ready. I decided I was. It's just been us since." She shrugged, but Ethan caught the weight behind it. The nights alone, the worries unspoken. He nodded, staring at his own drawing. "My dad left too, when I was about her age. Sent money, but that was it. No visits, no calls. The admission slipped out, easier than he'd imagined. Mia looked at him, her gray eyes softening. That must have been hard, she said, genuine empathy in her tone. Money doesn't hug you good night. Ethan smiled faintly, the truth of her words resonating. Sophie returned then, thrusting a new drawing into his hands. A scribbled heart with arms, labeled warm hug. For you, she said, beaming. He took it, folding it carefully into his pocket. Thanks, Sophie. I'll keep it safe. As the class wrapped up, parents arriving to collect their kids, Mia packed the supplies. You didn't have to stay, she said to Ethan, but her smile suggested she didn't mind. He helped fold the blanket, their hands brushing briefly. I enjoyed it, he replied honestly. Maybe I'll swing by again next week. It was a question, tentative, but real. Mia paused, considering, then nodded. Sure, if you're around. Sophie hugged him goodbye, her small arms tight, and as they walked away, Ethan stood there, the drawing warm in his pocket. The park's energy swirled around him, but for the first time, he felt part of it. Not an observer, but connected. The city waited, its demands unchanged, but something in him had shifted. A door cracked open to possibilities he hadn't sought. The drawing rested on Ethan's kitchen counter that evening, its colorful lines a stark contrast to the sleek marble. Sophie's heart with arms stared back at him, a child's simple gift that carried unexpected weight. He traced the edges with his finger, the paper still warm from the park's sun, and felt the shift settle deeper. A quiet invitation to return, to step beyond the isolation he'd cultivated. The city's hum outside his windows felt less oppressive, as if the park's energy had followed him home. The following Saturday, Ethan found himself back at Central Park, the routine forming without conscious effort. The oak tree loomed familiar, its branches shading the same picnic blanket where Mia's art class unfolded. Children dotted the grass, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves, and Sophie spotted him first, waving wildly from her spot. Warm hug, man, she called, her voice carrying over the chatter, drawing smiles from nearby parents. Mia looked up from distributing crayons, her gray eyes lighting with recognition. You're back, she said, a hint of amusement in her tone as she straightened. Ethan approached, hands in his pockets, offering a casual shrug. Couldn't stay away. Figured I'd see what masterpiece Sophie's working on today. Sophie beamed, patting the spot beside her. Sit, I'm drawing a park adventure. He joined them, the grass soft under him, and the hour passed in easy rhythm. Ethan helped Sophie blend colors, his large hands clumsy next to her small ones, but her giggles made every mistake worthwhile. Mia moved among the kids, her guidance patient and inspiring, turning scribbles into stories. In the quieter moments, she and Ethan talked about the changing leaves, a new exhibit at the Met, the challenges of city living. It was surface level, but beneath it, a current flowed, pulling them closer. As the weeks blurred into a pattern, Ethan's visits became anticipated. He arrived each Saturday with small offerings, a box of fresh crayons one week, a bag of apples from a farmer's market the next. For the artists, he'd say, handing them to Mia with a grin. She accepted with growing ease, her initial caution softening into warmth. You're spoiling them, she teased once, but her smile said otherwise. Sophie dubbed him Uncle Warm, a title that stuck after she announced it during a class. Her declaration met with cheers from the other kids. She'd greet him with a running hug, her small body colliding with his legs, and he'd lift her briefly, spinning her in a circle that left her breathless with joy. Those hugs lingered longer now, a ritual that healed something in him, stitch by stitch. He remembered his mother's embraces, rare but fierce, and wondered if this was what fatherhood felt like. Not blood, but choice. One afternoon, as rain threatened the sky, the class moved under a pavilion. Sophie focused on a drawing of a rainy day picnic, her brow furrowed in concentration. Mia sat beside Ethan, packing stray crayons. You know you don't have to come every week, she said softly, her voice carrying a question. He met her gaze, the gray of her eyes like storm clouds. I want to, he replied simply. It's nice, different from my usual Saturdays. She nodded, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. What are your usual Saturdays like? Ethan hesitated, then shared glimpses. Endless emails, site visits to construction zones, dinners alone at high-end spots where the food was impeccable, but the company non-existent. Sounds lonely, Mia said, her words gentle, not judgmental. He shrugged, but the truth hung between them. It is, but it's what I know. Mia glanced at Sophie, who was adding raindrops to her page. I get that. After Sophie's dad left, I built walls too. Focused on work, on her. Didn't let anyone in. She paused, her fingers twisting a crayon wrapper. But kids have a way of cracking those walls. Ethan followed her gaze, watching Sophie's focused expression. She does, he agreed. Reminds me of myself at that age, wanting something simple, like a hug at the end of the day. The rain started then, a soft patter on the pavilion roof, and the class wrapped early. Parents arrived in a flurry of umbrellas, but Ethan lingered, helping Mia gather the last supplies. Sophie tugged his sleeve. Can we have a picnic next time, even if it rains? She asked, her eyes hopeful. He chuckled. Deal, I'll bring the snacks. The next week, true to his word, Ethan arrived with a basket. Sandwiches from a deli, fruit and juice boxes. The weather held, and after class, they spread a blanket under the oak. Sophie dove into the food, chattering about school friends and her latest drawings. Mia watched with a soft smile, occasionally glancing at Ethan. This is kind of you, she said as Sophie ran off to chase a butterfly. But why? We're strangers, really. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, the grass tickling his arms. Not anymore, he said. And honestly, it's for me too. I didn't realize how much I missed this. Simple things like sharing a meal, hearing a kid laugh. He paused, searching for words. My mom tried her best, but it was just us. No picnics, no art classes. I buried that hurt in work, in money. But Sophie, she reminds me it's okay to want more. Mia's expression softened, vulnerability flickering in her eyes. I know that feeling. Art was my escape. Dreamed of illustrating books, but life happened. Sophie came, and I wouldn't trade her for anything. But it's hard sometimes, trusting people again. She looked away towards Sophie, twirling in the grass. You're good with her. Patient. Ethan followed her gaze, warmth spreading in his chest. She makes it easy. Sophie returned, plopping down with a handful of dandelions. For you, Uncle Warm, she said, pressing them into his hand. He accepted, tucking one behind her ear, and the moment felt right, unforced. As the sun dipped lower, they packed up, Sophie yawning against Mia's shoulder. See you next week? Mia asked, her voice tentative but hopeful. Ethan nodded, walking them to the path's edge. Wouldn't miss it. He watched them go, Sophie waving over Mia's shoulder, and felt the bond solidify. Not just with the child, but with her mother, whose quiet strength mirrored his own hidden depths. Back in his penthouse that night, the city's lights twinkling like distant stars, Ethan placed the dandelions in a glass of water. They wilted slightly, but their yellow blooms brought color to the sterile space. He sat, sketching idly on a napkin, a rough outline of 3 figures on a blanket, and realized this was no longer just visits. It was a connection, fragile and growing, pulling him toward a life he hadn't planned, but desperately needed. The napkin sketch lay unfolded on Ethan's counter the next morning, its rough lines a reminder of the picnic's warmth. He sipped his coffee, the city awakening beyond his windows, and felt the pull stronger than ever. The park had become an anchor in his week, a space where walls crumbled under Sophie's laughter and Mia's quiet insights. He pocketed the napkin, a talisman of sorts, and headed out, the routine now as natural as breathing. Weeks turned into a gentle cadence, each Saturday weaving them tighter. But life, with its unpredictable edges, tested that bond one overcast afternoon. Ethan's phone buzzed during a midday meeting, a rare call from Mia, her number saved after a shared contact for class updates. He excused himself from the boardroom, the executives' voices fading as he stepped into the hall. Mia, everything okay? Her voice came through, strained but composed. Sophie's sick, bad cold, maybe flu. I had to cancel the class, posted on social media about it. She paused, the background filled with Sophie's muffled cough. She's asking for you. Says she wants a story from Uncle Warm. Ethan felt a pang, sharp and unfamiliar. I'm on my way. Text me your address. He wrapped the meeting abruptly, delegating the rest to his assistant, and stopped at a pharmacy en route. Bags in hand, medicine, tissues, a stuffed bear for Sophie, he navigated Brooklyn's quieter streets, the contrast to Manhattan's stark. Mia's building was modest, a walk-up with peeling paint and flower boxes in the windows. She buzzed him in, and he climbed the stairs, the scent of soup wafting from her door. Mia opened it, her face pale, hair in a messy bun. "You didn't have to come," she said, but her eyes betrayed relief. She wore sweats, practical and worn, and led him into a cozy living room cluttered with art supplies and toys. Sophie lay on the couch, bundled in blankets, her cheeks flushed. "Uncle Warm," she rasped, sitting up weakly, her arms outstretched. Ethan knelt beside her, setting the bags down. "Hey, brave girl. Heard you needed a hero." He handed her the bear, and she clutched it, her smile faint but genuine. Mia watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "She's been down since last night. Fever's high, but the doctor's appointment is tomorrow." Ethan nodded, unpacking the medicine. "This should help. And I brought soup. Chicken noodle. The cure-all." They settled into a rhythm, Mia administering the meds, Ethan telling an improvised tale about a bear who painted rainbows to chase away storms. Sophie's eyes drooped, her laughter turning to yawns, and soon she slept, the bear tucked under her chin. Mia sank into an armchair, rubbing her temples. "Thank you," she said softly. "I hate asking for help. Always have." Ethan sat across from her, the room's warmth a far cry from his penthouse's chill. "You didn't ask. I offered." He glanced around, the walls adorned with Sophie's artwork, framed sketches of parks and families, a testament to Mia's world. "This place, it's homey. Reminds me of where I grew up, minus the art." Mia smiled faintly. "Art's my lifeline. Started drawing as a kid, escaped into it when things got tough. College for illustration, but then Sophie, priorities shifted." She looked at her sleeping daughter. "Wouldn't change it, but it's exhausting sometimes. No family nearby, just us." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "My mom was the same. Worked doubles, left me with neighbors. I learned to fend for myself early." He paused, the vulnerability surfacing. "But I miss the little things, like someone there when I was sick, telling stories." Mia's eyes met his, understanding bridging the space. "You're giving that to her now. It's more than most would do." The afternoon stretched, rain pattering against the windows as they talked. Mia shared snippets of her past, the ex who vanished at the first sign of responsibility, the freelance gigs that barely covered rent, the joy Sophie brought despite it all. Ethan opened up about his father's absence, the checks that arrived like apologies but felt like dismissals. "Money fixed the surface," he said, "but not the inside." Sophie stirred, calling weakly for water, and they tended to her together, Mia with the glass, Ethan adjusting her pillows. As evening fell, her fever broke slightly, color returning to her cheeks. "Can Uncle Warm stay for dinner?" she asked, her voice stronger. Mia glanced at Ethan, who nodded. "If it's okay with your mom." They ate simple pasta at the small table, Sophie nibbling from her spot on the couch. Laughter filled the room, light and healing, as Ethan spun another story. Mia's tension eased, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. "You're good at this," she said later, as Sophie dozed off again. "Father material, even if you don't see it." Ethan felt a warmth spread, not just from the meal. "Maybe I'm learning." He helped clear the dishes, their movements synchronized in the tiny kitchen. As he prepared to leave, Sophie woke briefly, hugging him goodbye. "Thanks for coming," she whispered. Mia walked him to the door, her expression soft. "Really, Ethan, this means a lot." He stepped into the hall, the rain now a steady drum outside. "Call if you need anything." "Anytime." She nodded, closing the door gently, and Ethan descended the stairs, the day's weight lifting. The city waited, its demands unchanged, but for the first time, he felt equipped to face them. Not alone, but bolstered by this budding trust. Back home, he placed Sophie's latest drawing, from before the illness, beside the napkin sketch. It depicted three figures holding hands under a sun, labeled in wobbly letters. Family picnic. The word family stared back, stirring something profound. He texted Mia, "How's she doing?" Her reply came quickly, "Better. Sleeping. Thanks again." He smiled, the connection solidifying, a bridge over the chasms of their past. The text exchange lingered on Ethan's screen long after Mia's reply, a simple thread that wove through his thoughts as the days unfolded. Sophie's recovery was swift, her energy returning like spring after a storm, and the park classes resumed with their familiar rhythm. But Ethan's world, divided between boardrooms and blankets, began to strain at the seams, the pull of his career clashing with the budding life he'd discovered. A major project loomed, a luxury high-rise in Midtown, the kind that could redefine his firm's skyline dominance. Meetings stacked like dominoes, emails flooded his inbox, and deadlines pressed with unyielding force. He buried himself in blueprints and negotiations, the penthouse becoming a command center of late-night calls and spreadsheets. Yet in stolen moments, he'd glance at the drawings on his counter. Sophie's vibrant colors a reminder of what waited beyond the glass walls. The conflict peaked on a crisp Thursday when Mia mentioned Sophie's upcoming art show, a modest exhibition at the community center attached to her school. "It's small," Mia texted, "but she's excited to show her piece. Saturday at 4 p.m. if you're free." Ethan stared at the message during a strategy session, his mind fracturing. The show clashed with a crucial investor pitch, one that could secure millions. He typed a quick, "I'll try," but the words felt hollow. That night, alone with the city's glow, Ethan paced his living room. The high-rise plans sprawled across his table, a testament to years of ambition, but they paled against memories of Sophie's hug, Mia's trusting gaze. He thought of his father, whose absences were always justified by business, leaving a boy to wonder if he mattered. Was he becoming that man? The question gnawed, a storm building inside. Saturday dawned gray, the city shrouded in mist. Ethan dressed for the pitch, suit sharp, tie knotted precisely, and headed to the office. The investors waited in the conference room, their expectations high, but as the clock ticked toward 3:30, Sophie's voice echoed in his mind. "Will Uncle Warm come see my drawing?" He stood at the window, phone in hand, Mia's address for the center saved. With a deep breath, he turned to his team. "Handle this without me. Something came up." The drive to Brooklyn was a blur of traffic and second thoughts. But as he pulled up to the community center, a brick building adorned with murals, the knot in his chest eased. Inside, the room buzzed with parents and kids, artwork lining the walls like a patchwork of dreams. Sophie spotted him from across the space, her face lighting up as she ran over, her dress twirling. "You came!" she exclaimed, hugging his legs tightly. Mia approached, surprise mingling with warmth in her eyes. "I thought you might be busy," she said, her hand briefly touching his arm. Ethan smiled, crouching to Sophie's level. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The show began, children presenting their pieces with shy pride. When Sophie's turn came, she stood tall, holding up her drawing. A vivid scene of a hug in the park, two figures embracing under a tree, colors swirling like emotion. "This is about the day I got my first dad hug," she announced, her voice clear. "It made me feel safe, like nothing bad could happen." The room murmured approvals, applause following, but Ethan's throat tightened. Mia squeezed his hand subtly, her touch grounding him amid the swell of feeling. Afterward, as families mingled, Mia pulled him aside near a window overlooking the misty streets. "That was about you," she said softly. "She's attached. We both are." Ethan nodded, vulnerability surfacing. "I almost didn't come. Work. It's always been my escape, my proof I'm not like my dad. But today, choosing this, choosing you two, felt right." Mia's eyes searched his gray depths, reflecting understanding. "My ex left because he couldn't choose us over his fears. I built walls after that, focused on art and Sophie, afraid to let anyone close." She paused, glancing at her daughter chatting with friends. "But you've been chipping away at them, Ethan. Patiently." He took her hand, the gesture natural now. "I'm scared too, of messing up, of not being enough." but I want to try. The admission hung between them, raw and real. The exhibition wrapped, and as they stepped outside, the mist lifted to reveal patches of blue. Ethan suggested a walk. Coffee, my treat. They strolled to a nearby cafe, Sophie skipping ahead with her ribbon-tied drawing. Over steaming mugs, black for him, latte for Mia, they talked deeper. Ethan shared the project's details, the pressure that had nearly kept him away. I delegated it, he said. First time in years. Mia listened, her fingers tracing the cup's rim. That's a step. Art taught me balance. Creation needs space to breathe. Sophie drew on a napkin between them, humming softly. The conversation flowed to dreams deferred, Mia's shelved book illustrations, Ethan's unspoken wish for family. Maybe we can help each other, he ventured, his voice tentative. Mia smiled, her hand covering his. I'd like that. As dusk fell, they walked back, Sophie yawning against Ethan's shoulder as he carried her. At Mia's door, she invited him in for a quick dinner, leftover soup warmed on the stove. They ate at the small table, laughter punctuating the meal, Sophie recounting her presentation with exaggerated gestures. Mia's eyes met Ethan's often, a spark kindling. Leaving that night, the Brooklyn streets alive with evening lights, Ethan felt lighter. In his car, he pulled out his phone, rescheduling the week's meetings to free up time. The high-rise could wait. This, whatever it was blooming, couldn't. He texted Mia. Thanks for today. Let's do dinner properly soon? Just us? Her reply buzzed. I'd love that. The drive home was reflective, the city's towers rising like old sentinels. Ethan parked and entered his penthouse, the space feeling less empty. He added Sophie's exhibition drawing to his growing collection, its huge scene a beacon. Change was coming, not in grand gestures, but in choices like today's, prioritizing heart over ambition, stepping into the unknown with open arms. The coffee invitation blossomed into something more, a quiet dinner at a Brooklyn bistro where candles flickered against the exposed brick walls. Ethan and Mia sat across from each other, Sophie safely with a neighbor babysitter, the evening theirs alone. Conversation flowed like wine, deep dives into forgotten dreams, shared laughs over childhood mishaps, the air charged with unspoken possibility. This feels good, Mia said, her hand brushing his across the table. Ethan agreed, the high-rise project fading further into the background. But life's tempest rarely warn, and the next storm hit without mercy. It started with a frantic call from Mia one Tuesday afternoon, her voice cracking over the line. Ethan, it's Sophie. She fell off her bike in the park. Hit her head. We're at the ER in Brooklyn General. His heart plummeted, the boardroom spinning as he grabbed his keys. I'm coming. Hold on. Traffic clawed at his patience. The city a labyrinth of red lights and honks. But he arrived breathless, bursting into the waiting room where Mia paced, her face etched with worry. She's in X-rays, she said, collapsing into his arms, her body trembling. She was playing, lost control. There was blood. Ethan held her tight, his own fear mirroring hers, whispering assurances he half believed. She's tough, like her mom. Hours blurred in the sterile glow of hospital lights. Doctors updating on a mild concussion, a sprained wrist, stitches for a gash. Sophie lay in her bed, pale but awake, her small hand bandaged. Uncle Warm, she murmured as Ethan entered, tears welling. He sat beside her, stroking her hair. Hey, brave artist, you gave us a scare. Mia hovered nearby, exhaustion lining her eyes, but gratitude shone through. You dropped everything, she said later, as Sophie dozed under the beeping monitors. Ethan nodded, his hand finding hers. Of course, you're both important. The word felt inadequate, but it bridged the moment. As night deepened, Ethan stayed, canceling a cross-town flight for a site visit without a second thought. He pulled a chair close to Sophie's bed, Mia curling in another, and began a story, softly spun, about a little girl who rode her bike through enchanted forests, turning falls into flights with the help of a loyal friend. Sophie's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile forming. Is the friend you? She asked. He chuckled. If you want him to be. Mia listened, tears silent on her cheeks. When Sophie slept again, she turned to Ethan. I was so scared, alone in that waiting room. But then you came. Her voice broke, and he pulled her close, their embrace a shield against the clinical cold. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. Neither am I. The crisis unearthed depths, Ethan sharing how his mother's illness in his teens had left him helpless, vowing never to feel that way again, building an empire as armor. Mia confessed her fears of vulnerability, the walls erected after abandonment, cracked now by his steady presence. You've been our rock, she said. I didn't know I needed one. By morning, Sophie's color returned, discharge papers in hand. Ethan drove them home, stopping for groceries to stock Mia's fridge. At the apartment, he helped settle Sophie on the couch with pillows and her sketch pad. Draw your adventure, he suggested, and she nodded, crayon in hand despite the bandage. The experience catalyzed change. Ethan stared at his reflection in Mia's bathroom mirror, seeing a man ready to pivot. Back at work, he scaled back the high-rise ambitions, redirecting resources to a community project, a safe playground in Brooklyn, complete with art installations for kids. It's personal, he told his team, visions of Sophie's fall fueling the plan. Mia joined the effort, offering designs for murals, their collaboration blending professional and personal. Evenings became shared, Ethan reading to Sophie, Mia cooking simple meals, conversations stretching late. One night as Sophie slept, Mia leaned against him on the couch. This feels like family, she said softly. He kissed her forehead. It does. The playground broke ground weeks later, Ethan overseeing with Mia at his side, Sophie watching from a blanket, her wrist healing. For kids like me, she said, pride in her voice. Ethan knelt, hugging her gently. For you, kiddo. The act sealed something profound, wounds mending in the shared labor of love. As autumn leaves began to fall, Ethan felt the transformation complete. Not overnight, but in these moments of crisis turned triumph. The hospital scare had been a forge, tempering their bond into something unbreakable. He looked at Mia, her hand in his, and knew this was the path he'd been seeking, one paved with presence over possession. The playground's groundbreaking echoed in Ethan's mind long after the shovels hit dirt, a symbol of renewal amid the falling leaves. Months slipped by in a gentle haze, the seasons shifting as their lives intertwined more deeply. The dinner dates with Mia evolved into shared routines, mornings with coffee and sketches, evenings with stories and laughter. Ethan found himself reshaping his world, trading late nights at the office for early departures, his high-rise dreams tempered by the joy of presence. He moved to a modest brownstone near Brooklyn, the penthouse's stark elegance swapped for warm wood floors and windows overlooking tree-lined streets. It was closer to Mia and Sophie, a deliberate choice to bridge the gaps. Work remained, deals closed, projects launched, but balanced now, his fortune funneled into community ventures like the playground, where kids' laughter would soon fill the air. Mia's art flourished too, her freelance classes expanding into a small studio space, funded partly by Ethan's quiet support, though she insisted on earning her way. Sophie's birthday arrived with spring's bloom, the park awakening in greens and florals. They planned a celebration at Central Park, the same oak tree shading a spread of blankets and balloons. Friends from school and the art class gathered, the air buzzing with chatter and the scent of fresh cake. A confection shaped like one of Sophie's drawings, 3 figures hugging under a rainbow. She wore a new sundress, twirling to show off the bracelet Ethan had given her, silver links etched with tiny hearts. The party unfolded in joyful chaos. Games of tag, face painting, a piñata bursting with candies. Ethan manned the grill, flipping burgers with a grin, while Mia organized a craft station, kids gluing feathers and beads. Sophie darted between them, her curls bouncing, her laughter infectious. As the sun climbed high, they gathered for cake, candles flickering in the breeze. Make a wish, Mia whispered, her hand on Sophie's shoulder. After the singing and slicing, Sophie stood on a picnic bench, her small frame commanding attention. The group quieted, eyes on her as she cleared her throat dramatically. I have something to say, she announced, her voice steady despite the flush on her cheeks. Thank you for coming to my birthday. but especially thank you to Uncle Warm. She looked at Ethan, her amber eyes shining. You gave me my first hug that day in the park. I didn't need money, just that. And now you give hugs that don't let go. You tell stories when I'm sick, help with drawings, and make mommy smile more. The words hung sweet in the air, murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. Ethan felt his chest swell, Mia's hand slipping into his, squeezing tight. Sophie continued undaunted. You're like the dad in my pictures, always there, warm and strong. I love you. Applause broke out, some wiping tears as Sophie hopped down and ran to Ethan, burying her face in his hug. He lifted her, holding close, the world narrowing to her small warmth. The party wound down with gifts unwrapped and goodbyes exchanged, but the three lingered under the tree, the sun dipping golden. Ethan and Mia sat side by side, Sophie nestled between them, munching leftover cake. That was brave, Mia said, ruffling her daughter's hair. Sophie grinned. It was true. Their days solidified into family, weekend walks in the park, where Sophie collected leaves for collages, cozy nights reading picture books, Ethan's voice animating characters with flair, quiet moments when Mia and Ethan stole kisses, their bond deepening into love unspoken but felt. They planned a summer trip, a cabin upstate, with hikes and stargazing, Sophie's first real vacation. Ethan changed profoundly, his ambition redirected. He volunteered at the studio, teaching basic drawing to underprivileged kids, using his resources to fund supplies. It's not about building taller, he told Mia one evening, as they watched Sophie sketch at the kitchen table. It's about building better. Mia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. You've built us something beautiful. She too grew bolder, submitting illustrations to publishers, her dreams rekindled by stability. Sophie thrived, her artwork evolving, canvases filled with families hugging, colors vibrant and full. This is us, she'd say, pointing to the trio in her latest piece. A dog added whimsically at the edge. As summer approached, they returned to Central Park one afternoon, the playground now complete, swings creaking, murals bright under Mia's designs. Sophie ran ahead, testing the slides, her joy echoing. Ethan and Mia followed, hands linked. Who knew a hug could lead here? He mused, pulling her close. Mia smiled, her gray eyes warm. Sometimes, that's all it takes, to open a heart. They watched Sophie play, then joined her, the three collapsing in a heap of laughter and embraces under the oak. The city pulsed around them, but in that moment, their world was complete. Money a tool, not a measure. Love the true currency. In the end, Ethan's journey wasn't about loss or gain, but rediscovery. A little girl's request had unraveled his solitude, weaving him into a tapestry of connection. Mia found strength in partnership, Sophie in unwavering arms. Together, they proved that healing came not from wealth's cold grasp, but from the simple, enduring power of a hug, one that mended souls and built families from the fragments of broken pasts.